This show is graciously dedicated to all the men and women of Charlestown, both past and present, who have served our country. To those who have passed, rest with the knowledge that you will never be forgotten.
Welcome to Charlestown and Beyond. I'm your host, Kathy Cookie Giordano. Very special show today. It's dedicated to all veterans, especially to the veterans of Charlestown. I'm going to bring it right into today's guest, Eddie Lone. Welcome, Eddie.
Thank you, Cookie. I'm very proud to be here to take part in this tribute to our veterans, both past and present. And to our veterans, I want to say thank you very much for your service. And I also wanted to take the opportunity to say to you personally, thank you. Charlestown, as you well know, is a special place, but I feel that it's often forgotten or just left out on many different levels. But we have this show, and we have you to put it together. And I know there's a lot of hard work that goes on behind the scenes. And I would like to compliment all the positive people in Charlestown every day that just do amazing things with our young people, with substance abuse. We have the food pantry. We have so many great things, and you get the word out. So twice a month, I get to watch your show, and I get to feel that maybe we're not forgotten. So I want to say thank you for all the hard work you do putting each and every one of these shows together. And it does take a lot of work. I've seen that firsthand. So thank you for all your hard work and being such a positive voice for Charlestown, our home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie.
Thank you.
Eddie, let's get into what we're going to be talking about today. I know if you've worked very hard on preparing this show, so I'm just going to turn it over to you, Eddie, and please start.
Okay. First of all, I wanted to say that this year, 2018, is the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I, Armistice Day. And for many years, the United States celebrated Armistice Day as a national holiday. The World War II veterans in the late 1940s, early 1950s, petitioned President Eisenhower to make a national holiday that remembered all our veterans, past and present, those who came home and those who didn't come home. So in 1954, President Eisenhower signed into law Veterans Day that we celebrate today. And I just thought that was a little bit of history that was amazing. You know, it always hasn't been Veterans Day.
Imagine that many years has passed.
Yeah.
And to have you memorialize it on this show,
Yeah.
I thank you.
Thank you. And another amazing fact that I learned from one of your previous shows is that Charlestown is getting very close to celebrating 400 years. That's amazing.
It is 1628 is when Charlestown was founded. And I know it's 10 years away, but I would hope that Charlestown has a wonderful celebration to do with the 400th anniversary. And it's never too early to start putting it together. So again, thank you for giving me the opportunity for the second time to tell Charlestown, come on, let's start planning for this.
Yeah, it's going to be here before you know it.
Yes, it will.
400 years.
And notice that Boston is celebrating 2030. That's all I keep hearing is 2030 is their founding date. So we're 2 years younger than Boston, so we will have the head start. So
Yeah. And I want to say that in my lifetime, I've been very fortunate to be able to travel. And I am, of course, a student of history. I've loved history all my life. And I've traveled to Ireland, to England, and to France. And each time that I have the opportunity to travel, I always seek out their history. And especially when I was in France on a couple of different occasions, I'll go to the cemeteries, go to the battlefields, the museums. But when you go to France, it's all spread out. You have to travel to see the history. So I'm very proud to say that Charlestown, I've yet to find its equal for such a small place. It has so much history just compacted in one small place. I've never seen its equal. And what's also very rewarding for me being, and for you too, being a lifelong resident of Charlestown, is that every single day, people from all over the world, we're on the Freedom Trail. So people come to Charlestown to see our town, to walk our streets. They want to see our history. It's there, it's free. I mean, I encourage people to get out and take their children and their grandchildren, their neighbors or people they have visiting. Go out and see it. It's all walkable. You know, and when I was in France, when you go to Normandy or you go out to Versailles, it's all spread out. But Charlestown, it's walkable. It's all there for you to see. So, I mean, you can go up and, again, all these folks coming to our neighborhood, you hear a lot of different languages being spoken. People come from Germany, from Asia, and they want to see Charlestown. So they have the opportunity to go up to Bunker Hill, and it's not only a battlefield, but a cemetery. And it's sacred ground. It really is sacred ground. And it is, of course, the first major battle of America's war for independence. It started in Charlestown, right in our backyard. I'm 3-4 streets away from this battlefield, and it's fascinating. Next, you can go to the museum across the street, and you can get out to the 5th Street Burial Ground and see many, many famous Charlestown people. My favorite person who's buried down there is Nathaniel Gorham, and he was born in Charlestown. He lived in City Square, and he signed the U.S. Constitution. A Charlestown guy signed the Constitution. It's amazing. You walk a little bit further from the monument, now you're in the training field, and you see this wonderful statue to all the men who fought in the Civil War. And I'm very proud to say that 3 men from Charlestown received the Congressional Medal of Honor during the Civil War. And the current Charlestown Militia Company, they can trace their roots back to 1636, drilling and practicing marching at the training field. So this is great. And then you walk another 10 minutes and you're in the Navy Yard. And this by itself is just loaded with history. We have the Constitution, we have the Cass and Young, and we have this beautiful memorial to our Korean War veterans. And it's absolutely wonderful. It's all there, so I encourage people, get out and just walk around Charlestown. It's just fascinating.
And may I add, bring your children and educate them.
Exactly, exactly.
Because that's where it all begins, the love of history.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. So I also wanted to point out that since the Battle of Bunker Hill, which was actually fought on Breed's Hill in 1775, men and women from Charlestown have taken part in every major war and conflict from 1775 to the present. The War of 1812, the Civil War, Spanish-American, both world wars, Korea and Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq. And as we sit here and speak, there are men and women from Charlestown in uniform. So Charlestown has always answered the call. It's always stood up and said, yeah, I want to help, I want to serve. So that in itself is absolutely amazing. So tonight we're going to actually talk about one unique story. And all the stories that have come out of Charlestown, and many have in almost 400 years. I'm going to introduce you tonight to a man from Charlestown who lived there all his life, and he served in World War II. He was the guy next door, and just an average kid. He went to St. Mary's Elementary School on Winthrop Street in the shadow of the monument, and he went and served in World War II. And he is one of almost 5,000 men from Charlestown that served in World War II.
And please mention the woman.
Yes, I do just want to say that, again, 5,000 men, 125 of them did not return. But the other amazing thing is, getting back to the Navy Yard, during World War II, we hear so much about Rosie the Riveter.
Yes.
And the contribution by women, okay, not only in Charlestown, but across the country, was immense. And the ladies didn't get the credit they should have. So not only were ladies charged with taking care of the house, taking care of the children, a lot of them also worked in the Charlestown Navy Yard as Rosie the Riveters. And I got a number, 8,500 women worked in the Navy Yard during World War II.
Amazing.
And what's even more amazing is 5,000 men served, but beyond being Rosie the Riveters, there were almost 100 women from Charlestown who were in uniform, the Army, the Navy, and the Marine Corps. We had Lady Marines from Charlestown, almost 100. And sadly, 2 of those ladies never came home. We lost 2 ladies in service from Charlestown. So again, my hat's off to the ladies who really contributed a lot to the war and continue to contribute. So the man that I'm going to introduce you to tonight, again, is just the guy next door, like so many men in World War II who went off to war. His name is William Tannen. And William Tannen's story begins with a photograph, and then it turns into a mystery, and then it turns into a promise. So we're going to look at all the aspects of William Tannen's story. So it does begin with a photograph, which you see up on the screen now. And this photograph was donated to the Charlestown Historical Society. And it was in pretty rough shape. A member of the Charlestown Historical Society, my friend Paul Lane is a member, and he showed me the photograph. And so, Cookie, I'm going to, he asked me a question that I'm going to ask you. Take a good look at this photograph, and you tell me what jumps right out at you.
Bunker Hill.
Bunker Hill.
And then underneath the B, there is an object. And if you really look closely, it's the Bunker Hill Monument.
Yeah.
That is remarkable. Can you tell us the story about this?
Yeah, the story just kind of took off. The first thing that I had to do is a complete restoration of the photograph so it looks as it does now. It's 74 years old, and it was really beat up. So now we're able to really enjoy it more. So Paul didn't have a lot of facts. The man who gave it to him really didn't know a lot. So all that we really knew up front was what was scribbled on the back in faded ink. And it basically says that it was taken in England on Thanksgiving Day, 1944. And it has the name of the 3 men in the photo. So the man in the center of the photograph is William Tannen of Charlestown.
Wow.
This is a kid from Charlestown, and he loved Charlestown so much that he took his love of the monument of Charlestown, he took it off to war with him. And he named this aircraft the Bunker Hill. So as I was doing my restoration, I became very intrigued, and I just started saying to myself, who is this man? Who is William Tannen? What did he see? Where did he go? What was his story? What's the story behind the Bunker Hill? And that's what I call the photograph, the Bunker Hill. What happened to the plane? What happened to William? So this was my quest to find out exactly, what the story is behind this amazing photograph. So I did some research, and I found an obituary, and to my delight, William Tannen, he lost a sister in 2014, but he still has a sister and a niece that are still with us. They no longer live in Charlestown, but I was able to locate them, and I told them what I had. And I said, would you be willing to sit down with me and tell me about William Tannen? And they said they would. So this in itself, again, I had a photograph, I had a puzzle with a lot of missing pieces, and the pieces were starting to come into play here. So in the meantime, while I was waiting to interview his family, I contacted Charlestown native Bill Durrett.
Wonderful man.
And as you well know, Bill is the founder of the Charlestown Veterans History Project. And Bill was actually on your show.
He was. I think it was at the beginning when he had the museum right there in the middle of City Square.
Wow. So Billy is unique in the fact that his mission is to interview Charlestown veterans and get their story and record it. Photographs, memorabilia, artifacts, and he preserves them for future generations. And I just had a conversation with him. He just had a show in Charlestown, and I told him, Bill, 100 years from now, someone's going to read this stuff and they're going to say, thank you, Billy Durrett, for what you've done. It's just, my hat is off to him. He is preserving all this history so it's not lost, So Billy came through for me, And he was able to give me some military information about William Tannen. So we find out that he was a corporal in the U.S. Army Air Corps, and he was a mechanic, and he was actually assigned to the U.S. Army Air Corps. And we got the dates of his service, and that was very important. And we found out that he served in England and in France. So now it all comes together with the photograph, because the photograph was taken in England. So we're getting some solid information from Billy. So once I found out that he was a member of the 34th Troop Carrier Squadron, I was able to do research on his squadron. And what I found was really fascinating. Our man from Charlestown, he was involved in 2 major military operations against Nazi Germany in World War II. First, from his base in England, and we found out from the research that it was at Spanhoe. It was an RAF base, Spanhoe. They launched a mission against Nazi-occupied Netherlands. And their second operation was in March of 1945, after they had moved to France. As the Allies were moving closer to Germany, they moved that whole operation, the 34th, deeper into France. So in March of 1945, William takes part in Operation Varsity. And what they do is they bring troops to cross the Rhine River into Germany. And this was amazing, and it was very successful. But the big thing, the big piece that came in for me is I was able to identify from the research from the 34th Troop Carrier Squadron's website that the photograph that we saw to open the show, it's not an airplane. It's a Waco glider.
Wow.
So this is what they worked extensively. And what they would do is take troops, and they were airborne troops, and they would transport them in airplanes and in the Waco gliders. So I positively identified this as a Waco glider.
Wow. What's a Waco glider?
Waco.
Waco. It's my County accent, I'm sorry. So, what do you know about these gliders?
Today's your lucky day, Cookie, because one of these Waco gliders just flew in and landed on the table in the studio.
Get out, the
We have
magic of television, wow.
We have one right in front of us. So I want to introduce everyone to a World War II Waco glider. And these Waco gliders are truly the unsung heroes of World War II. They were used not only against Germany, but also in the Pacific against Japan. And it's very interesting. I did so much research on it. And first I want to get into the actual construction of the craft. Okay, and we actually put a little tag on here, Bunker Hill.
There's the Bunker Hill, just as seen in the photo.
As seen in the photo.
With the monument underneath it.
Yes. So this is William's craft from the photograph. So basically the Waco glider was America's first military stealth aircraft. And it was constructed of a metal frame, and it was hollow metal, just to, make it even lighter. It wasn't solid metal. So what they did is they built a complete frame of metal, and then they took plywood, and they wrapped it in spruce plywood. So it's metal with plywood on top of it, and then they wrapped the whole thing in canvas. And then they had a special solution that they would put over the seams so it wouldn't break apart. So you're looking at metal, plywood, and canvas. And this compartment back here, this little square compartment, this is where the troops actually sat.
Wow. And
it would hold 13 combat troops. And the men who actually rode in this little compartment back here, because they were wrapped in plywood, they called it a flying coffin. And unfortunately, it did have a high mortality rate. So they sat back here. Now this vehicle could carry 13 men. Up in the front, you would have a pilot and a co-pilot. And it could also carry a Jeep, and it could also carry a 75 millimeter howitzer, which is a big gun that they'd want to get on the ground. And not all at the same time. It either carried men, it carried a Jeep, or it carried a weapon. So this craft was amazing, and How it basically worked was it would be towed. It had a cable, and it would be towed by a C-47 transport plane. Wow. They would pull it off the ground and pull it up and lift it. And what it would do is it would tow it in back of enemy lines. They'd cut the cable, and the glider would be on its own.
It would be silent, too, no motor.
It's very stealthy. It had no motor and didn't make any noise. But the bad thing was that if the Germans did see this, they could fire up from the ground, and the bottom is just made out of plywood.
Right.
So they really had no protection. And on their website, some of the men would say that we had no motor, we had no parachutes, and we had no second chance. So if this glider was coming down into a farmer's field and there were Germans on the ground, it didn't have the luxury of powering up and flying out. They would actually just they had to land. And because of its great weight, it was at the mercy of the air, the wind. So they came down pretty hard. And again, there was a high mortality rate. And the men that sat in the back, there were no luxuries. They sat on a bench, a plywood bench. And they would actually have harnesses on their shoulders, and they would attach themselves to the metal frame. So when this came down hard,
Excuse me.
bless you, they came down hard also.
Wow.
So this is quite an amazing aircraft. And now I've brought 2 photographs with me that I wanted to show you. And if you look at the photographs, the first photograph on the left-hand side, this was Operation Market Garden. And this was taken in September of 1944. And these are members of the 101st Airborne Division. And you can see this is a Waco glider that landed on its nose. And you can actually see the pilot's cabin, you can see the metal frame, and everything is just torn apart. I mean, these were pretty flimsy. And you can see they're pulling one of their comrades out of this, this aircraft. So these men were true heroes to get on board these very flimsy, basically made out of wood, and just glide in. And the second photograph, they were a little bit more lucky. If you look in the background of the photograph, you will see the Waco glider is successfully on the ground. And this is Operation Varsity. And this was in March of 1945. And the American troops, these are the 17th Airborne Division. And they're on the ground. And they were very successful. It was the most successful one-day operation by an airborne unit. And our man from Charlestown, William Tannen, was a part of this.
Wow.
And what they would basically do is the C-47 would tow them behind enemy lines, let's say the day before a major battle. And these gliders would land, and the men inside, which were, highly trained paratroopers, they would sabotage communications, they would take out military targets, cannons, guns, whatever they could. And so they would kind of just create havoc in the background before the main force attacked. And again, our man, William Tannen, was a part of this. And these, like I say, are the kind of the unsung heroes of World War II. They were just very flimsy, and these men got inside them.
They were true heroes, not knowing if they were even going to survive the landing. And if they broke a leg and arm,
That was it.
that was it.
That was it. And I want to say what's amazing, too, is in 1945 in March, 900 of these gliders crossed the Rhine River. It was the most successful operation, again, of World War II. But the American Army, in these gliders, they were the first military force to cross the Rhine River against Germany since Napoleon did it in 1805. So we did it, too, and we did it with these Waco gliders. It's absolutely amazing.
Can you tell me, I know in our conversation getting ready for the show, can you tell me what our hero mentioned today did as a lad that helped get these gliders up in the air?
Yeah, it is amazing that how people end up doing jobs in the military. So I was able to find out when I met with the family, William's sister Margaret. William grew up in Charlestown, of course, and actually, could we just jump in? It kind of flows. There's a lot of different facts. If you don't, I apologize.
No.
So armed with this information, now I go and I sit down with William's family. And there's just a lot of facts playing in. I apologize. But so the next photo we have up here, this is a photo of William's sister. The lady on the left is Margaret Tannen Klessens. She's 94 years old, and she's amazing. She's absolutely amazing. And the lady next to her is William's niece, and that's Sally Klessens. And they moved out of Charlestown. They don't live in Charlestown, but they still have a lot of contacts. And they invited me into their home to, you know, find out more about this mystery. So I've got his background, I've got his military information, we've identified the Bunker Hill. So now I'm hoping that his family can tell me some personal information about William. Who was this guy? So I sit down with them, and again, they're absolutely amazing. And you can see that Sally, his niece, is holding a picture of the glider, the first photo we saw. And to my amazement, they had never seen the photograph before.
Wow.
Never seen it, and they were just totally amazed. And Margaret actually looked at it and said, "That's my Billy. That's my Billy." So it made her very happy, and I'm happy about that. So the other photograph that Margaret is holding is a photograph of her father.
My.
And his name is also William Tannen. So if we could see the photo of, okay, now this man right here, this photo you're looking at, this is William Tannen, and he is the father of the glider pilot, okay? So he is a Charlestown guy also, and very briefly, he served in World War I. He left Charlestown, and he went to France. And tragically, he was in the Argonne fighting the Germans. And at that time, the Germans used mustard gas on his unit. And he was severely depleted by this gas. He was gassed in France. So according to Margaret, he came home and got a job and tried to put it all behind him. But he died soon after from the effects of this gas. So basically, the kids grew up. William grew up without a father, and Margaret and the rest of their siblings. This poor man served his country. He was with the 26th Yankee Division in France, and just looks like really an amazing man.
He's a handsome man, yes.
And again, another Charlestown guy who marched off to war. So now I kind of sit down and I become very involved in a conversation with Margaret, who is my new friend. And she has the most beautiful blue eyes, very piercing eyes. And I look at her eyes, and they were sort of like windows to the past. And she wasn't making a lot of eye contact, but kind of looked off with a smile, as if she was reliving what she was talking about. It was fascinating. And she took me back to the Charlestown of the 1920s and the 1930s. And the Tannen family, where William was born, they lived at 26 Austin Street in Charlestown. And it's about where the 99 restaurant is today. So she tells me that that parking lot that's there today at the mall, it used to be all houses. It was different. And she took me back to this old Charlestown where she said we could look out our back window and I could see the Charlestown State Prison right out the window where the Bunker Hill Community College is today. And she talked about the elevated train on Main Street, cobblestone streets, and a much simpler life in Charlestown. And she was very happy then. So to answer your question, she told me that my brother William grew up without a father figure. So around the corner on Rutherford Avenue, about where Mishawam is today, there was a trucking company owned by a Mr. Breen. So Mr. Breen had a trucking company, and he used to put canvas on trucks. So it's starting to fit like a glove on
Yes,
the hand.
it is, yes.
So you see where this is going. So Mr. Breen took young William in the 1920s and 30s, and he taught him how to install, how to repair. So William Tannen knew all this construction. He knew this process of working with canvas. So when the war does break out, they asked him, do you have any special skills? And he said, I know canvas. So they put him working with these gliders.
My.
So I found this out from Margaret, which was amazing. So Margaret went back to, just to kind of personalize Charlestown, she went back to 26 Austin Street, which was their home. And she said, I can remember laying on the floor. And she said, my mother had the radio on, and President Roosevelt was on the radio. And he was telling us that Japan had just bombed Pearl Harbor. And she said, I heard that. And she said, everything changed. Everything changed. And again, with that smile on her face, she was looking as if she was watching it, reliving it. And she said, we all signed up. We all wanted to be a part of this war. So William joined, and so did Margaret. So, and that's the thing that was really surprising, is that Margaret actually joined the Women's Army Corps. And I have this beautiful photograph that I brought along. This is Margaret Tannen Klessens, and it was taken in 1944.
What a lovely looking woman.
And she is actually one of the almost 100 women from Charlestown who put on a uniform. And she was very proud of her uniform and
Absolutely.
her service. And again, hats off to the ladies, because she told me that she had a job where she worked with coded messages coming in from outside of the United States. And she was able to translate this code. She had a very high security clearance. She was locked in a room with an armed guard, and she said that we would get coded messages from Europe, and we would translate and pass that on so people could read it. So this lady from Charlestown played a very important role
Yes, she did.
in World War II.
My.
Wow. So that's Margaret Tannen, and I'm very proud to say she's my friend, and just a lovely lady. She still has the same face. She hasn't changed. And she's sharp as a tack. She gets around, and she just is social, and she's just a very, very nice lady. Very nice indeed. So I want to take off on what she said. Mm-hmm. And she told me that after President Roosevelt told us we were at war, she said everybody from Charlestown signed up. So I've already mentioned 5,000 men, 100 women. So what's really interesting is you've heard about the Fighting Sullivans.
Right.
Okay, and these were 5 brothers that were all tragically killed in World War II. There were actually 4 Charlestown families, 4 families from Charlestown. And each one of those 4 families, they had 7 sons in the military.
My goodness.
7 boys. And one of those families was the Kelly family, and they lived on Bunker Hill Street. And they had 7 boys serving overseas. And tragically, they lost 2 of those sons. And one of them, he has a nice plaque up at Green Street. And I want to introduce you to Daniel Kelly, another kid from Charlestown. He played on Bunker Hill Street, and just an average guy from Charlestown. He was a member of the 3rd Marine Division, and he fought his way ashore on a volcanic island in the South Pacific called Iwo Jima. And Private Kelly was killed on Iwo Jima, half a world away from Charlestown. This kid from Bunker Hill Street, he died on Iwo Jima. So I say that he will never be forgotten.
No.
As long as...
None of our veterans will, not in our heart. Whether we knew them, their family, or we didn't.
Right.
We honor them.
So Cookie, now I can see the finish line. I'm getting excited. I'm sitting with Margaret, and I said, Margaret, we're going to close this up. And I said, what do you know about this photograph? What happened to the Bunker Hill? Was it shot down? Did it crash? Was it successful? What happened? And what did your brother tell you about his service in Europe? And she said, unfortunately, my brother came home from World War II, like most men of that generation did. And he just put it all behind him.
My.
And he never talked too much about it. So she said, I'm sorry, I can't help you as far as, specifics. The only thing that he did say to her is when he got to England originally, he was on a furlough in London, and London was bombed by German planes.
While he was there.
While he was there.
Wow.
That's the only thing he talked about. So I guess what we can say is that the Bunker Hill flies on. I did say to her that in the photograph, he's wearing a flight jacket. You'll see in the photograph, he's wearing the fur collar, and this was a jacket that was worn by men that flew in these planes. So Margaret said, I wouldn't be surprised, him being that type of guy, if he did fly in one of those craft.
And here we're showing the photo of him in the flight jacket. There he is again in
Yeah.
the middle.
Very, very proud. So now I want to finish by saying that the part I spoke about at the beginning about a promise. Unfortunately, William Tannen died in Charlestown in 1984. But before he passed away, he lived on Main Street in a very simple apartment, and he took this picture off the wall, the glider picture, and he gave it to a friend and said, this is me. This is when I was a young guy in the war. This is special to me. So can you please preserve this? So I'm very proud that through you and this show, we are able to preserve and keep this promise to William. We preserved this photo, but we also told his story. He'll never be forgotten. And as I left the two ladies, I couldn't help but think that I was in the presence of this great Charlestown military family, a father and his two children that served in 2 world wars. It's fascinating.
Really fascinating, really. And so many more families in Charlestown that are like that. Generational serving our country,
Right?
which is remarkable.
Yes.
And I'm so pleased that you were able to bring us this one soldier's story today.
Yeah.
He represents so many across the nation, but we're really proud of him because he came from Charlestown.
And the important thing is not to forget. We've got to record their stories and get the photographs and just get the shovel out and start digging. And I spent almost 2 months on this project, but I'm just so proud that the photograph will now hang in the Charlestown Museum, and we know his story.
That's right. Preserved for a long, long time, forever, I hope.
Exactly, exactly. So I'd like to end the show tonight, Cookie. Did you want to make some closing comments? Or?
I did. Before you end the show, because I know you have a very wonderful ending planned for us.
Right.
But let me end as I do every show, and of course thanking Eddie Lone. He is a wonderful Charlestown historian, as you have seen with this show. His special interest is the Civil War. He really knows so much about the Civil War. And also, he is a very renowned photographer. And I hope to be able to put at the end of my show in the future how you can get a hold of Eddie so you can get on his website and see some of his photos. He, along with Paul Lane, who you see the photos at the end of a lot of my shows with Paul, and also Eddie has promised that he will be sending us some of his photos in the future to be shown at the end of future programs. So with that, I want to thank Eddie. And I want to thank you for being with us tonight and staying with us. The show ran a little bit longer because it is so important that we honor and cherish our veterans for all they did to allow us to have the life that we live today. So for me, until next time, Charlestown, take care of one another. And I'm going to turn it back to Eddie for closing. Eddie?
Thank you, Cookie. Thank you so much. It was so well said. I want to say thank you. So tonight I would like to end the show with 14 photographs, and they're all taken in Charlestown. And these 14 photographs are going to show how Charlestown remembers its veterans. In Flanders fields, the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago, we lived. We felt the dawn. We saw the sunset glow. We loved, and we were loved. And now we lie in Flanders fields. So take up our quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands we throw the torch, be it yours to hold high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. John McCrae, May 1915.